I can't hide the feelings that I know.
Here we go. Heroes and villains this week.
Heroes and villains.
Yeah, it was just weird because it was funny because I asked you if you had any ideas, and then the next day I was just listening to my Amazon playlist, and that song came on, and I was like, "Oh, this is perfect," because I know me, heroes and villains is so much in my brain because it's no secret it's no secret I'm a comic book guy and superheroes and nerdy stuff, but it also it just hit home because of how many times I found myself becoming my own villain, the villain in my own story, when before I even knew I was really even doing that, I thought that's just how people thought, was negatively and kind of self-sabotaging themselves. But you end up being so in your own way sometimes that you become the villain of your own story. And also just realizing that even when you are the hero of your story, you're almost always a villain in somebody else's. And neither one of those is right or wrong. They just are. Not everything has to be so black and white, and that's where I think the best villains in all the comic books have that in common, where if you just completely despise a villain, it's not a very well-written villain. Because all the best villains kind of, you see where they're coming from, or they have a purpose. They're not just out for fun. They have a reason. They have something behind them, pushing them to be the villain. And I heard a quote the other day. It said, "Heroes and villains have the exact same backstory," which made me think of how, let's go with Batman. Batman could have become a villain just as easily as he became a hero with what happened to him. That kind of trauma, he could have turned into a villain and just thought the world was terrible and he wanted to get vengeance on everybody, but he went the other way with it. And a villain that I think really quantifies this, shows this to a T, is Thanos. Because Thanos wasn't just doing it because he thought he wanted to kill a bunch of people. He literally thought he was saving these worlds, that he would go and snap everybody, half of all existence out of all life out of existence. But he thought he was doing it for the betterment of the galaxy. He wasn't just doing it. Now, I'm not saying that I like Thanos as a person, but you can kind of see he has some, it's not just a selfish motivation.
Yeah, just not
what he's
not
doing.
Just power. And even
right.
Even when you talk about say Justice League, when you're looking at that and Batman thinks Superman's the villain ish, and Superman thinks Batman's the vigilante, but they don't see each other as being on the same team, even though they're in different cities. But it's
right.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about the internal villain, is a lot of times when we block our way from being the hero, So if you have a point where in your life that you have an ability to do something and don't do it, if it was something that you feel like, or it comes back and you say, like, I should have done this, whatever it is, that's kind of where we villainize that, and it stays in that loop a lot of times. And what they say is always hindsight's 2020, but like to your point, the villains, it's once you get to know, they introduce their stories, their backstories, a lot of times, and then it throws a little bit of compassion that way. And I think that's what
Right. Yeah, exactly.
we could also honor ourselves that way. And when you talk about the backstory of just about anybody, and not only that, but their perception of what the backstory is, right? Because I have people,
Right.
as being in foster care when I was younger, excuse me, the people, it's like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And it afforded me opportunity to see life differently, and it had different challenges. But I don't hang my hat on it. It's just part of what it was. I don't want to throw myself in the victim mode, and I think that's one of the things
Which
that
is easy to do.
the villain does. It throws us into that victim mode so that we have to overcome something.
Yeah. Also, I think we need a little villain in us. I mean, you can't have good without bad, and I don't mean like literally like going out but sometimes you can use the villain side of yourself, being your own villain, as motivation, as pushing yourself to be more of a hero in your own life. Because when I was really bad, when the depression was really bad and everything just seemed like it was going off the rails, and I thought that there was no other way out but to kill myself, I use that as motivation now because I can't imagine just leaving. So I used that part of my own villain backstory to use that as almost my hero origin story, where I use this terrible time and realize that if I had done what I wanted to do when I was younger, this life that I have, this amazing place I am now, would never have happened, which allows me to now be the hero, which is the one that pushes me to do things that are uncomfortable, but I know I need to do, that are like this podcast. It's not something I ever thought I would be comfortable enough or even have the guts to do. But because, I mean, obviously it makes it easier when, it's with your dad, but it was just one of those things that like never would have happened if it hadn't been for the dark times that I've gone through. And even like me finally thinking about going to open mic nights and trying stand up. I don't know if I'm going to be any good at it. I did stand up once at church camp, but something that I've always like thought, even if it was just something to do every once in a while or just try once, I want to do it. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun, but I also don't know. It's one of those things that it could go terribly and I never want to do it again, but I'm pushing myself to do that, to push past that barrier that I have in my life, that worry, that anxiety. And there's only one way to do it, and it's to push through and finally commit and do it.
Yeah. Do you think just from what you were saying, the villain is like the shadow times we have in our lives.
Yeah.
But and now there are still those times where those things kind of sneak into your thought process.
Oh, for sure. The darkness, yeah, for sure. It's always going to be around. And there are days, weeks, maybe even now that I go without having the darkness, the shadow, the villain, whatever you want to call it, creeping into my head, trying to get me to do not necessarily hurt myself, but just getting me to do the wrong thing or getting me to go down the wrong path or, give up on things. But it used to be every single day, like every day of my life. I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh, this isn't worth living. And I'd go to bed thinking, oh, I can't believe I have to wake up in the morning. Now I wake up and like this morning, I woke up, the kids were getting up, Ash was up, I got the baby up. Like things could literally not be better. And it's just crazy to think of how I almost let the darkness in so much that it was almost just, this was almost non-existent. But also I let the light in more. And I've focused more on the light instead of, I used to focus a lot more on the darkness of myself. Those thoughts and feelings and emotions got in easier and stayed longer than anything good that happened, which is what overtakes you. And it's hard to come back from that, but a lot of therapy and a lot of people having my back and cheering me on has gone. I've gone from there to here, and the hero's running the show now.
It's interesting because I think if we look at the psychology of it, part of what I would see as being what we would see as the hero could actually feed the villain, let's say. And what I mean by that is, so if you're sitting there and you're trying to be the tough guy, you don't want to let anybody in, you're going to conquer it. That's the hero, right? That's kind of how we're taught to be strong,
Right.
be overcome this, control this, that. And then that part of the hero actually feeds the villain that actually is underlying in the dark, the shadows, and saying, keep up that. We don't need support. We don't need any help. We don't need anybody to love us. This is us. We're going to do it all by ourselves. So it's weird to think about that, that the hero could actually be feeding the villain in some manners.
I think it's more than some that it's feeding. It's feeding the hero off of the hero, or the hero is feeding I would say that, not that the hero is feeding the villain, but the villain is feeding off of the hero. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we could also turn it around and say
I feel like if you say
the villain is
I
feeding
feel like you say the hero
right?
is feeding the villain. If you say the hero is feeding the villain, I feel like that's like a purposeful or consensual thing. But I think it's closer to the villain feeding on or feeding off of the energy of the hero, half of you. And a great quote that kind of like I wanted to talk about today that I didn't think was going to come in this naturally, but this is pretty awesome. So it's like, I know you don't like the movie, but The Dark Knight. There's a scene where Joker has Batman and he's got him like dead to rights, like he's got him where he wants him. And Batman says, "Why are you trying to kill me?" Or well, yeah, why are you trying to kill me or something like that? And the Joker starts laughing and says, I don't want to kill you. I need you. I'm nothing without you. And it just kind of shows that these villains in our lives stick around and they need the hero to survive, but you also need the hero to defeat the villain. So it's this symbiotic relationship that they need each other and we need each part of them, but we can't let the villain / darkness take over too much, because there are times where you're going to need to be that stoic, stubborn person that doesn't want anybody's help. There's times where that's a necessary evil, I would say. There's certain times where that's going to need to, that it saved me certain times, because knowing that I could do things by myself has kept me going. But also you can't let that take over. You have to know what times are appropriate to let a little bit of darkness in, or a little bit of that, I don't want to say, darkness. But
So it seems like the like you're and that would go both ways. They're feeding each other. They're just keeping each other alive enough to try to get the upper hand, let's say. Does that make sense? But just enough. Um, and that's
yeah, it's a constant battle for first place.
and I think the out of balance thing with it is, and this is just the theoretical, is that the hero always has the more compassion or more conscience, I guess, maybe.
Compassion, I would say. I mean, you don't think of villains having too much compassion, so
Yeah, but there's still in most of the stories, there's once you know their background, then there's some compassion even to the villain, and not agreeing with what they do, but saying, "Oh, it makes sense now, or makes more sense why they are the way they are."
right. But the Joker, we don't ever get that, which is the weird thing about the Joker. They always talk about how, and The Dark Knight is a great movie, but I understand why you don't watch it, because it is a very, there's not a lot of uplifting or good moments in it. It's just a lot of negativity, and it is a very hard movie to watch over and over. Like, I couldn't sit there. There's some movies I could watch on repeat just because they're such good movies and I just love them. But that movie, you watch it, and I think once we start to realize that how just a piece of what an asshole the Joker is, because he doesn't want money. He doesn't want power. He doesn't want anything. He just wants to cause absolute chaos. And he just wants, but he wants nothing in return. He doesn't want all this money. He doesn't want fame. He doesn't want power. He doesn't want to be, ruling the world. He just wants to watch it, as Alfred in that movie says, he just wants to watch the world burn. And that's what kind of separates him from a lot of the other villains, which I didn't mean for this to become like a villain thing, like a thing of me talking about villains, but I kind of like it. But a lot of, like you said, a lot of these villains, their backstories make you feel compassionate or feel bad or understand where they're coming from. But Joker, we don't really have, especially the Joker in The Dark Knight, we don't have this big backstory where he's some, lost soul that's trying to find himself, or he's just a good kid that came on some hard times and went the wrong way. But it's just such a crazy, like you said, balance. Like you have to have it's yin and yang. It's good versus evil. It's light versus darkness, whatever you want to call it. But like yin and yang, they say that they're two halves or two fish. And the reason they don't eat each other is because it needs the other one to exist. So like if you look at the symbol, it's almost like if you took away the black piece and it was just all white, you would have no more of the fish. If you took away, then the opposite way is true. So you need to keep a little bit of it, like you said, the balance of keeping a villain inside of you or keeping part of that to keep yourself from imploding, I guess, because I lost my train of thought. We'll go on.
So another thing is the interesting thing about the Yin is the way that the shape of it and then the circle of each color is part of the. So there's a black dot in the white. There's a white dot in the black, which also shows balance and creates balance. It could be masculine, feminine. It could be whatever it is. But it is. It's true. It's the true balance of things, and I think that's when we look at one thing to really help in life, the humanness of it, is actually that I find is boundaries. And boundaries are that in either way, right? Boundaries are those things. I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to let somebody do this to me, right? And once we have,
Right.
the way I talk about boundaries is that when we can have really good boundaries, and once we start messing with those and bringing them in, they get uncomfortable because it's too close. Then they become barriers. And that's kind of where the villain likes things, right? It wants to be shut off.
Right, when becoming a barrier.
So when we're in the boundaries, we can keep that light and check into what we're willing to do, and keep those stronger boundaries and keep them at a level that, or a distance that's actually productive. Then we don't have to have, we won't have those big jumps in villain or darkness. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I like the boundaries thing. Boundaries are I feel like with social media and everybody having a phone or some kind of thing that they're always sharing everything. Excuse me. I mean, you can go to a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant, you see 9 people taking a picture of their food because they have to let everybody know what they had for dinner. Mm-hmm. I think as a people, we've gotten away from all these any kind of healthy boundary. Not necessarily all of us, but you know what I'm saying? Like the vast majority of people just want to share everything, every thought, every moment of their lives. They don't have any solid, stable boundaries, which is in essence making us all, because in my yin and yang analogy, if you, instead of saying take one away, if you take out the barriers, then they would no longer form the shapes. They would just go together. Mm-hmm. So what we're as a society, and I don't obviously mean this in 100% of people, but we're becoming, there's no individuality anymore. Not like there used to be when we were growing up. Like you had everybody kind of, I feel like everybody had quirks back in the day. Like when I was growing up, there was always like if you didn't know who you were talking about, you could be like, oh, the kid that, he picks his boogers and flicks them at people. Like there was always something an identifier that like.
Mm-hmm.
But now, like half the time, it'd be like, oh, you know this person? Oh no, it's the girl with the blonde hair and the Instagram page that she looks at. She shows her food all the time, or the girl that does the OnlyFans, or the you can't. Nobody just has something that's there. Like we're all just social media hounds right now. Which I mean, I know we're doing this podcast. We love our guys on social media, but I think we need to take a step back every once. So like I was just at a baseball game for 2 hours, didn't check my phone once because I'm focusing on the game. Like it's a great, and I didn't miss checking my phone for a notification. It was a nice time just sitting there and being in the game. And that's, I think, the boundary in a roundabout way, like I always talk. I think we need to set that boundary between technology and real life. I think it's starting to become too blurred where people think that the life they see on the internet is the life that people are actually living, and it's almost 90% not true.
And there's that drive, right? And this would be in this situation. So if we just use just kind of social media, we throw this into an analogy, is the hero part of it would be putting stuff up on whatever platform it is and saying, I just need to tell my truth, or I want this to help one person or whatever it is. Right. The villain in this now is the person
Right.
that looks down at the likes. How many likes did I get? What did people say? See, the villain, that part of it brings
Right.
it brings the boundaries too close, because if somebody says something negative, then all of a sudden it seems like it feels like it's more important than helping somebody. It's more about how it reflects on that person.
Right.
So in that analogy, then there is good. I mean, like I post on Facebook. I'm trying to get onto posting more on the man myth Facebook, but I just like, if I see something like I did the breakfast buffet because I feed birds out on the railing of the deck, and there was 2 squirrels and all kinds of birds. I'm like, I just want, if it makes somebody smile or laugh, then that's what it's there for. How many likes I get doesn't really matter,
Right.
because that's not what I'm doing it
No,
for. It made me laugh. I'm sharing my laugh.
well, if you and I are doing this for the likes, we would have quit a long time ago.
We're turning.
I mean, it's just been a fucking fun time. I met a bunch of cool people. Like, it's more time we get to spend together. Yeah, it would be awesome if this took off and we were, got to do it in a studio together all the time. It would be fun.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what the point of this is. That's not the goal is to reach people's hearts and souls and minds and let them know that, and not just men, but everybody, that it's not just you. No matter what you're going through, there's somebody else that will be going through it too, or that will have seen somebody go through it that you can talk to. We want to make a community. It's not about making money or having likes or dislikes or comments or people like, we're just doing it. And that's the best part about this is it's just you and me talking for half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a good time. We get to get some stuff off our chest. Actually, you got me started writing down. Try to write down one thought every day, and I try to make it a positive thought. I was terrible at journaling, but now I have a notebook with me and I try to write down, and I know it's a baby step, but it's what I need to do to start journaling and start being better about journaling. Because if I do this, then it'll be a domino effect. But that's something I never would have thought to do. And unless we did this podcast. And I'm doing the podcast with you, and it started doing it. So it's like there's no I got pretty big on TikTok from one video.
Mm-hmm.
I know people on TikTok that if their video doesn't get a certain amount of likes or a certain amount of views, they'll take the video down because they're worried about the algorithm. And if that video didn't do good, the algorithm's not going to keep bumping up their videos. Well, that's not why you make videos. I made videos because it was my way of venting and expressing my emotions at the time. It was the way of getting everything out.
Mm-hmm.
I have videos with like 3 likes on it. I don't care about that. If I made a video that I think is good, I'm going to leave it up. I don't care if the algorithm likes it or not. But it's just crazy to me to think that you would have a video and some of these people, it's like, if it doesn't get 1 million views in a day, they take it down. Like, are you kidding me? Like, some people would kill to get 1 million views in 10 years, and you're sitting here worried about it didn't get it in 24 hours. But that's the boundaries again.
Right. And that's bringing that in. That's having the barrier. Like the boundaries are way too close. They're just, it means too much to them, or the process means too much to them. And, I've left both of my videos up the whole time.
All 2 of them.
I've done 2 of them. But yeah, I think, and I like that. Even, excuse me, when we talk about in social circles too, is it seems like to me that there has to be, like, people look for the villain, right? They make, if there's 5 or 6 people sitting around and somebody did something to Jimmy Joe Bob, and then the other 4 people are like, oh yeah, he's the villain, right? Which turns whoever they're talking about into in essence, like the hero, and they want to kind of be part of that. But I think it's funny
Right.
how that happens. If you get a few people together, and there's going to be at some point, I would imagine, probably most of the time, somebody's going to show up as the villain.
Yeah. Even among close friends, there's always, what did you hear what they did last time? I can't believe this. There's just, I don't think, like you said, I don't think it's all the time necessarily, but I feel like every time there's a lot of times there's always that one, even if it's just a conversation about somebody who's not present, it's always kind of, like you said, trying to find the villain. Like somebody wants to make sure that somebody else is the villain. But that goes into my other point about this week. You're always going to be even if it's just for a millisecond, at some point in your life, you have been the villain in somebody's story. Mm-hmm. Whether it's something as simple as someone you cut off in traffic, or it's as simple or it's as complex as a kid that you didn't like you in high school, and still to this day holds a grudge. But you're all in your mind, in the grand scheme of your story, most of us are the heroes in our story. We're the main character. We're Link going to fight Ganondorf for Zelda. Like, we're Mario jumping over the mushrooms to get to Princess Peach. But in somebody's story, you're Bowser.
Right.
It's somebody's story that they tell. Somebody somewhere has a story that they tell about you, that you are the Bowser, and there's no doubt about it. But you're still thinking of yourself as Mario. And it's just, I think the last couple weeks I've gotten, I think it just gotten into my own, kind of delved into my own self a little bit more, and realized that I was I was letting things aggravate me that shouldn't have been aggravating me, and I was letting things get to me that shouldn't get to me. And I was thinking of things, of ways to blame somebody else.
Mhm.
Like you said, trying to find a villain.
Right.
And that made me think, well, I'm sure there's somebody out there that's thinking this exact same thing. And I popped into their head when I'm thinking of somebody else trying to think it. And it's just something I knew I needed to stop. I needed to not let that happen. I can't let, I don't want somebody else to be the villain in my story, because that gives them power in my story. And the
Or
only
does it,
person I want to have power in my story is me.
or does it try to wake up the hero in you to battle that?
Well, now I don't know. I didn't think of it that way. This is why we're on opposite sides of the table here.
Oh, right. So
so to speak.
the that would be the hero looking for the villain so that the hero could be conquering, right? I think a lot of times too is when we hold on to that. It's okay to do that process, right? We go through the process of, okay, the hero put the villain into his little cushy jail cell for a little bit, and then you're good, right?
Right.
But it's when we hold on to it. And I remember this was a funny story. And I talked about foster care when I was, and I don't remember that. I remember the situation. I remember the exact situation. Somebody was picking on sis, and I was there. Kid was bigger than me. I didn't know how big. Didn't matter, right? I don't even know. I can't remember what he was doing. I just remember running across the top of the picnic table, jumping on him and pummeling him. And so
It does not surprise me.
in that situation, I was being, in my mind, the hero. Right.
Right.
So when Nikki died, my bio mom, she passed away, I met one of the people. I met the lady that was one of the fosters. And she said, "You don't remember me," and I didn't. I remembered her son, which was the guy beat up.
Who's the one you pummeled?
And she said, he still has a little bit of fear about that. So in that case, I was the villain.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So it's just funny how, but to have that late, I mean, I don't know, that was 30, almost 40 years later. Why would that still be part of him, or part of his thought process, or part of anything that he thought about, other than if it was funny? Right.
Right.
So in essence, he always had a villain in his life, which was me.
Right.
And there was always a place in his mind that I don't know if his hero failed or it would try to bring it back so that he would feel better. I don't know. I don't know the situation. I've never met him or seen him again since then that I can remember. But
we're gonna get a bunch of comments from him on this video now.
like,
that motherfucker!
Now I'm
gonna get him.
But and that's when you talked about the hero and the villain and how we have it inside of us. I think it could be that little voice that's always nagging at you about certain things that would be the villain. And I could see that working, that the hero would have to come out and just like stop the loop. Right? Yeah. That's enough. I've listened to you long enough. Go back to your jail cell or whatever it is. Right. But that is that darkness, and the light can come out, and instead of just rolling and going, well, here he is again, here it is again, here it is again, is just say, okay, that's enough. And I think if we can do that, that's the boundary, right? It's not letting it get to be the barrier.
Right.
So I just thought I'd share that story. It was pretty funny.
That's a good ending for sure. It's a perfect way to end it. Story about my dad beating up a guy for sis or aunt Rhonda. So I have a call to action that
What? Look at you.
I know, it's crazy. I couldn't believe it myself. Don't let the villain take over, but don't let the hero either. That's my call to action. I don't know if it's good or not.
Sounds good. It sounds like, in that case, if the hero was too much into himself, he'd actually become the villain.
Right. Which is another, well, I'm going to quote somebody real quick again. Two-Face in The Dark Knight says you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And I've always loved that quote because it's true. Because they're talking about the Roman Empire and Caesar and how he'd never relinquished his power and all this stuff. But then later on in the movie, Batman becomes the villain. But I think like you said, if you don't have a villain for your hero to fight, or your hero like wins 100%, then there's nothing left to keep him in check from becoming the villain. There's nothing to remind him why he has these morals or these standards. And that's why you can't let either one of them take over.
Gotcha. Let's see. My call to action would be, actually, I watched the new Queer Eyes on, and I saw the first episode. They're doing a fraternity, and one of the guys, Guillermo, I think it is, takes all the brothers out to talk, and they just completely open up to each other, and tears, and they just don't know. Like, somebody saying, I didn't know you're going through this, man. It's bad on me for not checking in. You guys know I got to share more. It was really cool to see. So watch that episode. It's pretty awesome. That's my call to action.
I've never watched that show, but
What?
I'll watch it. I've seen clips from the show, and I've watched pieces of it. I've never sat down and watched a whole episode.
If
Maybe
I would have
I don't
known they
know.
were going to be in
It's
Philly,
I love.
you would have been on the show. I missed it.
Oh. And I would have been going 100%. I would have been all in on that. Oh my God. It would have been the best episode ever.
It would have been perfect.
Hey, Queer Eye, come back to Philly. We need your help.
we have Houston, we have a problem.
Wait a second. You mean graphic T-shirts and trucker hats aren't okay to wear all the time?
All the time. That's funny.
I have a bunch of like adult shirts.
I haven't missed an episode, I don't think, of that. It just,
that doesn't surprise me.
We talked about it. What I see brings joy to people. That's why I don't watch The Dark Knight. I don't think that brings joy to people. But that's just me.
One of the things that I love is Undercover Boss. I love that show.
Never seen it.
No? That's a good one. You'd like that. Yeah, go look it up.
Go look it up. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, find an episode. You'll cry. I cry almost every episode I watch. I don't know if it's on still. I haven't watched it in a long time, but Ash would not laugh at me, but she's like, "Of course you're crying," because I cry I'll cry at every movie if it's sad. And then I get pissed off if there's no happy ending at the end of a movie. I'm really pissed. I don't care if it's supposed to be real life. I'm pissed off.
There's got to be some kind of rainbow at the end of the movie. Huh?
I think so. It's just annoying to me when they're like, "Oh, yeah, he died. That's it."
That's it.
All right, just remember,
You are not broken, and you're not alone.
love you,
Love ya.
and there's nothing you can do about it.
Not a thing. Not a thing.
If you could see you, if you could see you.